chaos of popular culture makes your brain hurt. You really need belief in the form of a transfusion of analysis and humor. It's time for a POPeration. Join hosts Eric and Stacey as they dissect popular culture one bloody organ at a time. It's just what the doctor ordered.
Hello, this is POPeration. I'm Eric.
I'm Stacey, and today we are going back to the past. I was going to say back to the future, and that made no sense at all.
Not at all.
Because we're not doing that.
Although, kind of. We might get to that. Hold on. Hold that thought. But we're going back to 1967.
Why are we doing that, Eric?
Because it was exactly 50 years ago.
It is. These
50 years ago.
These are movies, they're having their birthday.
And it doesn't seem like they're 50 years old.
They're getting their AARP card is what they're doing.
I'm not even 50 years old, and these movies do not seem like they should be 50 years old.
It is very strange, although when you watch some of them, it does feel like 50 years old because of how different the world is.
Yes, they're dated in some way, but they're also really modern in other ways, so it's interesting. So as per usual, I did a Google. So
You are such a Google. You know what? It's better than doing a Bing. Here's my problem. So we have an Alexa. I have an Alexa.
Yeah.
Okay, one of those Amazon things, kind of like Siri, kind of like Hal from 2001, whatever. And if she doesn't know something, she says, I've sent you the Bing file or the Bing whatever. And I'm like, a Bing link. And they're awful. Bing is awful. It knows nothing.
Okay, if Bing ever wanted to sponsor this podcast, you pretty much just shot that out the...
Sorry.
But Google, call us, because we use you all the time. Okay, so I just did a quick Google about what was going on in 1967, so we could set the stage a little bit for these. So Lyndon Johnson was president at the time, so JFK had recently been assassinated. Vietnam War in full swing. It would not end until 1975, but the war was going on.
JFK died in 63, so it has 5 years ago, but it was still in everybody's memory.
Sure.
But Martin Luther King was still around, as was Bobby Kennedy.
Yeah, in fact, Martin Luther King was very busy denouncing the war at this time. He'd kind of expanded his reach and now is really talking to anyone who was in the lower classes. He was really kind of addressing poverty as kind of a new issue, and he would be assassinated the following year. Elvis and Priscilla got married this year. Just, I just picture the hair, and it just takes me right back to 1967. Jane Mansfield died in an auto accident.
Was that 50 years ago?
In 1967.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow.
Thurgood Marshall is confirmed to the U.S. Supreme Court, which has something to do with one of the movies that we'll be talking about.
By the way, this has nothing to do with any of that, but I was watching, with my daughters, we're watching the new MST3K series on Netflix.
Mystery Science Theater 3000 for the uninitiated.
Well done. And they're doing really bad movies, and there's one, and I don't remember, but it's about Hercules. I don't remember the name of it. And it is Jane Mansfield and what's-his-face, Marissa Hargitay. What's her name?
Mariska Hargitay.
Her dad, Mickey Hargitay.
Okay.
It may be where they met, but they're both in this.
Mariska might have been conceived on the set of Hercules.
And it's an awful, it's a really, really bad movie. But it's Jane Mansfield with black hair.
Wow.
I know, and it's a little disconcerting.
That's weird.
But anyway, it was just fun fact there that I saw that.
Okay. So while Thurgood Marshall was being confirmed to the U.S. Supreme Court, race riots were happening in Tampa, Buffalo, Detroit, New Jersey, D.C., all over the country. People were protesting, which that's one of the things that doesn't sound like 50 years ago. That sounds like pretty much right now.
5 years ago, it sounded like 45 years ago.
Yeah.
Now it sounds like yesterday.
Now it sounds like today. The Summer of Love happened in San Francisco's...
which is kind of ironic considering the last little factoid you gave us.
Yeah, exactly. But the hippie movement was in full swing.
Big time.
Jimi Hendrix released his debut album, Are You Experienced? McDonald's introduced the Big Mac.
And I feel like those are two very even... Those are even facts. Thanks for that.
And a lot of really good movies were released in 67.
Oh, it's a stupid amount of good movies.
Some of the ones that we're not going to get into too much detail around today.
Here are some we're not going to talk about.
But put it into context of when we're talking. Camelot, the Learner and Loan
Richard
musical,
Harris.
Vanessa Redgrave, taking over for Julie Andrews, which was she lost both of her big roles on Broadway. She was in My Fair Lady and she was in Camelot, and she didn't get to make either movie. They had somebody else, and now I think Vanessa did her own
and yet
singing.
She's still working. Ba-dum-bum.
Yeah. Vanessa did her own singing, I believe. Audrey Hepburn did not.
That. Correct. I knew that part. I'm not sure, yeah.
Cool Hand Luke was released in 67.
Huge. The eggs.
Yeah. Dirty
that's all I'm
Dozen.
going to say.
The Dirty Dozen.
Fun. Love that.
Divorce American Style, which I've not seen.
That was, I believe, Debbie Reynolds.
I think so.
Dick Van Dyke, maybe?
Maybe.
Something like that. Yeah.
How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying, which I've seen on stage, but I've never seen.
You've never seen the movie? Oh, it's adorable.
In Cold Blood, Truman Capote.
Huge, yeah.
In the Heat of the Night.
Huge.
Sidney Poitier.
Yep.
The Taming of the Shrew, Liz Taylor and Richard Burton.
Correct.
Thoroughly Modern Millie, speaking of
Julie
Ms.
Andrews and Mary Tyler Moore.
Yep. Up the Down Staircase.
Never saw that.
Really? Okay. I've seen it on stage. I've never seen the movie, but it's about a young teacher, inner city school, basically the difficulties of teaching, and you get to know some of the kids in the classroom. Is it a British thing?
No. Oh, okay.
No.
I'm thinking something else.
I don't know if I'd call this a great movie, but certainly a classic in its own right. Valley of the Dolls.
I'm sorry. That is awesome. Boobies! Yeah.
Oh, you know how awful fags can be, Sharon Tate said in the middle of Valley of the Dolls. And then finally, Audrey Hepburn in Wait Until Dark.
One of my daughter's favorite. That was one that, because when you have slumber parties with kids in middle school, you have to be careful because some parents don't want their kids watching. When I grew up, you could put any old horror movie, put that in quotes, where there's blood and gore, and nobody blinked. But now parents get really weird. So when my daughter would want to have scary movies, I went back into the 70s or the 60s even. So she watched Wait Until Dark. Now, it's a slow-paced movie compared to modern-made movies. But then when you get to the end, this isn't a spoiler, she is blind, and the bad guys go after her, and of course, one way she deals with it is she turns out all the lights so that they're a little bit more even. Oh my gosh, these fifth graders were screaming their lungs out. It was awesome.
That's great.
It holds up, but it's slow in the beginning because it is not how we are. It's not our attention span right now.
Yeah, but clearly it'll still work.
Oh, no, it'll totally work. It'll totally work.
Which maybe tells us we need to broaden our attention span because we are still capable of doing that. But we have very short attention spans these days. We're very easily distracted.
You see how fast Twitter goes. I watch my Twitter feed. I know, I sound so old. So old right now. I watch the tweets go by. I watch my Twitter feed, and it's just flying because something is new every single second.
Exactly. And, the 140 characters, the fact that took off just shows us we like things that are so bite-sized. Yeah. Yep. And things
sound
have got to move.
Bites. That's what they're called. They're sound bites.
And things have got to move. And yet, that's one of the things that I did notice about, all three of these movies is that there was kind of a little bit of speed in the plot, the ones that we're going to talk about. So maybe we'll get into that too.
But yeah, those are the ones we're not talking about.
But sets the stage of where we are in 1967. So it was a real time of turmoil and turbulence and things where society was changing. And I think these three movies that we're going to get into are
a lot of people were fighting for something. Yeah. Whether it was their rights, whether it was just justice, whether it was for freedom from the past.
Or they were just sent overseas fighting in the Vietnam War.
Or they were literally fighting, correct. So there was a lot of fighting going on, and I think that has something to do with what we're going to talk about.
So the first one that we're going to get into with some depth is a real classic for some interesting reasons, and it is Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway in Bonnie and Clyde, which I had never seen before prepping for this particular episode. So this is the first time I ever saw Bonnie and Clyde.
I've seen it twice. Once I didn't write in the last month or so, but it was several months ago. I thought, I'm going to watch that again. And it was interesting seeing it, and it had been about 15 years or so since I'd seen it. It was interesting seeing it now, just because of how filmmaking has changed and what audiences, again, a lot of this that we're talking about attention spans, what audiences are prepared to see, what they want to see, what their expectations are. And at the time, it was groundbreaking because of the filmmaking to a very large extent. It's interesting because walked away kind of going, oh, okay. I was not overwhelmed, shall we say. I walked away going, oh. And there were times when I'm like, oh, that was written interest. What?
Yeah.
You guys just met.
Yeah, that's what I meant by the speed thing, right? It was just like, so the very first scene of Bonnie and Clyde is just Bonnie is she's naked. She's getting dressed for work. She sees this man outside her window who she thinks might be trying to steal her mother's car and yells out to him. And before you know it, like they're on the road
in 5 minutes.
They fall in love like that.
Yep.
Which is a theme of all three of these movies is people who fall in love fairly instantaneously. They don't develop a lot of big relationships before they just are pledged to each other for life.
Right.
This is the first of those three couples. But I think it is saying something. I mean, Bonnie is an interesting character, Bonnie Parker.
She is. I also think and I don't mean to be the wet blanket here. I also think it says they didn't know a lot about what their relationship was.
No.
So they're guessing.
Yeah, and what I kind of took from Bonnie and Clyde was that she was not really in love with him so much as she was in love with what he represented.
Correct.
Which was this outlaw life of doing whatever you want.
And I'm away from this.
Yes.
What I am in right now.
Screw the rest of the world. Yeah. We can make our own rules. And the idea that he was just inviting her to come along and, hi, I'm Clyde Barrow. Yeah. I rob banks. You can do whatever you want. You can kill whoever you want. You can just, let everything you've ever learned about how to be a good girl just go. And go with it. And so I believed it in that sense. I didn't believe that she was in love with him necessarily. And they go to great lengths to let you know that this is not a great romance by really highlighting the fact that apparently Clyde Barrow was impotent for most of their relationship.
But I also think we talked about what was happening in 1967. This is indicative. This was a 1960s version of a 1930s couple.
Yeah.
Okay.
It is a period piece. It's set in the Depression.
It's set in the Depression, but it is made in the 60s. Had you made Bonnie and Clyde in 1940, say, so you're very close to the history when it was happening, it would have been a very different picture.
It would have been. They would have fallen in love, first of all.
Well, it wouldn't have. It also, the fact that it was a positive that he was going against authority. I mean, that was all gravy. And that's what she was looking for. That is, and that's, again, the summer of love, all of that was happening, the freedom. And that's what I think it's really important to understand that this movie was made when it was made. It has very little to do with the 30s.
Yeah. In fact, even in the way that it's costumed and the way that it's, the style of it. I mean, Faye Dunaway looks like she just walked right out of a 60s magazine. 1960s
hairdo. It's an homage to the 30s dresses and whatnot, but it's not. It's the 60s version of the 30s.
Yeah. And a lot of the thematic stuff, I agree, is just it's not about, it's just all about rebellion. And there were a lot of rebels walking around in the 60s. And I think that's probably why this movie caught fire
as well as, and you referred to the sex part, and that was all, great. That wasn't even blinked at. It was like, oh, we're going to have sex? Yeah, we are. There's no morality thought. There's no thinking. There's no, we have to be in love first. No, don't have to. Again, it's the 60s. And then also, of course, the huge one is that last scene. Spoiler, they die. Just in case you hadn't heard or read a history book. And they're pretty, the history books tells you that, and if you see the real life photos of the car after they were killed, you realize that the movie didn't make up how many bullets hit that car.
Yeah.
It just, it filmed it in slow motion, and it was very long. It's a very long scene.
And I don't know that it was in that much slow. It feels like slow motion.
Oh, maybe
because it's never ending. It's never.
Maybe it's not
ending.
Slow motion. I'm thinking something else. Sorry.
Yeah, but it just keeps going. It feels slow mo because you're thinking this can't possibly go on much longer, and it keeps going.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the sex was pretty frank in terms of its discussions about sex,
Correct.
which are the fact that he, for the most of the movie, can't get it up, and then all of a sudden at the very end, right before they're about to meet their death, he finally,
suddenly,
can follow through.
And I think that was just a storyteller technique. There's no history there.
But she's in this. But it's telling that she's in this completely sexless relationship,
which goes with your idea that that's not why she...
That's not why she was there.
Yeah.
So this movie did win an Oscar for Estelle Parsons as the annoying sister-in-law.
And she was annoying.
Yes. So Gene Hackman comes along, who is Warren Beatty's brother, and he and Blanche, his wife, join the Barrow Gang along with a couple of other ragtag folks who are kind of along for the ride. And at first, she's very against this whole thing, not because she has any kind of morality to her, but just because it's inconvenient for her to be a part of a gang that robs banks. She wants her creature comforts, which are not around to her. She does have this really heartbreaking final scene.
She's what got her the Oscar, I think.
That was her Oscar reel, where she's got bandages over both of her eyes because she's been blinded by all the bullets and the gunfire that she's kind of lived through. And she's telling a cop a story about her experiences, and all he wants to know is, where are Bonnie and Clyde? Where can I find them? And as soon as she lets that piece drop, he is out of that room, and she keeps talking because she has no idea that no one's listening to her. And in a sense, it's making fun of her because she kind of thinks she's the center of the universe anyway.
Oh yeah, that's not she is not the character that we're supposed to have much sympathy for at all. We're not supposed to like her. We're supposed to like Bonnie, who's killing people. Yeah,
I mean, these two people who are really amoral, we kind of are supposed to,
they're our heroes. They are literally our heroes.
Yeah, really anti-heroes in a lot of, this is a movie I kind of was watching the whole time going, Quentin Tarantino would make this movie now. If it hadn't already been made.
Yes, you totally would.
This would have been a Tarantino movie. And it probably would have been funnier.
It would have been funnier, but it also would have been more violent. Which
even more violent.
Is crazy. But it would have been more violent, and it would have been more graphic.
Yes.
In its violence.
Yes.
One thing that I liked about that last scene, and it was jarring to the public because it does go on for so long, and it is very violent. It's not like the lens is splattered with blood.
No.
Which is what keeps it viewable to an extent. Yeah. In that if it were, and that's what I think Tarantino there would have been blood everywhere. And what I think is jarring. One thing that's jarring is it is a clean kill, if you will. It's that you are able. It's a crazy scene. If you don't do anything, YouTube that scene because it is an amazing historical filmmaking kind of moment. In the story, it really is the climax. You're just kind of like, okay, we kind of saw that it was going to go. That it was going to go to a bad end,
but not that bad.
But we didn't realize. Although we had seen conversations with these cops, and we knew that this was a matter of pride, and that in real life it was a matter of ego. They were going to take these people down. They weren't going to waste time on the trial or any of that because them getting sympathy or anything like that. They were going to take care of this and be heroes. That was what was happening.
And the cop that got them was a cop that earlier in the film they had humiliated.
Correct.
And it was Bonnie. She's got a mean streak. She was the one who was decided that when they found this cop and they got him into handcuffs and basically he was at their mercy, what's the worst thing we could do? It was almost like she invented social media, like right in front of our eyes. She said, let's not hurt him. Let's get our picture taken with him.
Yeah.
Let's make him, be surrounded by us.
She did a lot of selfies.
She
did selfies too.
She gave him a big kiss and made him look like he was part of the gang. And then they said, let's send this picture out so it gets published in every newspaper in the country. And they made a fool of him.
Yes.
And that's why he was the cop that then went to talk to Blanche when she was blinded, found out where they were, hid in the bushes, and that's why it was riddled them with bullets.
And that's why it was so violent.
And I will say that even though it's an old movie and it feels like an old movie in a lot of ways, that ending was still really shocking. I just sat there with my eyes like,
it wasn't a happy ending. It was not a happy ending. But again, it was the 60s. We were getting to where the 70s realism was kind of come in. Yeah. And so we were starting that in this era here that it's, people, there aren't happy endings for everybody's life. So here it is. We're not going to sugarcoat it. We're not going to tie a bow around it. We didn't make the cops the heroes. Even though you could have spun this story to where they were completely sympathetic, and when the end comes, you're like, thank God they got those hooligans off the road.
Horrible people, yeah.
And so I think this was kind of a turning point.
20 years before, this would have been a movie starring Jimmy Stewart as the cop who brought them down.
Oh my gosh. You're exactly right. Yeah. Or Gary Cooper.
Yeah.
Either one of those. Mm-hmm.
One of those. But, the way it is, even so, there is a little bit of morality in there. Only if you catch yourself, and this is where the 60s and that whole counterculture was different. I think the movie wanted you to fall in love with Bonnie and Clyde a little bit.
Yes.
And then basically say, and this is what happens to people like that.
That's why it was Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway. They were two of the hottest stars at the time.
Yes,
I don't
hottest
think
in terms of box office, and Warren Beatty is a young man, hot just in terms of
and
hot.
Faye Dunaway was very sexy.
Yes.
And I mean, they were the it up and comers at the time. So yeah, they were supposed to be who you rooted for.
Yeah.
And I think that you then had all these teenagers and early 20-somethings that were rooting for them because they were going against the old guard.
Yeah.
And unfortunately at the end, when the old guard takes them down, people were frustrated. That was part of their frustration in real life, is that the old guard seemed to be doing that in real life too. So, yeah, I think that. But yeah, it was very much a 60s film about the 30s. It was not a 30s historical documentary type thing.
Yeah, I agree. So if all you know about Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway is they really fucked up the Oscars last year, then maybe go back and watch this movie.
You need to go back and see why they were actually asked to do that.
Yes, see them in their prime. And it wasn't until I looked up, movies 50 years ago and I realized Bonnie and Clyde, it was their 50th anniversary. Right?
Yep, yeah.
And they were there, and boy, did they mess up. But anyway.
It was Faye's fault, by the way.
Totally Faye's fault. Warren knew what he was doing. At least he knew enough to keep his mouth shut.
He was trying to be gentlemanly and say to her, what should we do? This is not the right name. And of course, she was so excited for anyone to say her name anywhere because she doesn't have a career. She just grabbed the card and read. She just read it. I'm like, dude.
Oh, Faye. And anyway, I didn't care. She was off drinking a cocktail while Warren came out and said, we made a mistake.
Yeah.
We made a mistake. Yeah. Poor Warren. Anyway, when we come back, two more groundbreaking films from 1967 are on our list. So join us after the break.
You're listening to POPeration with Eric and Stacey. Take a deep breath. This may sting a little.
And we are back. This is POPeration. I'm Stacey.
I'm Eric. And the next film on our list, we're looking at movies from 1967.
Because it's happy birthday. They're 50 this year.
Yeah, for no other reason than it's their golden anniversary.
It just gives us an excuse to talk about them.
Yeah, it does. It does. And, it is it just so happens that 2017 has some interesting flashbacks to some of these films. So the next film on our list, Spencer Tracy, Katharine Hepburn, better known for their films in the 40s and 50s. Mm-hmm. This was their ninth and final movie together. Sidney Poitier and Cecil Kellaway, who I just adored in this movie. He was just so cute. Guess Who's Coming to Dinner? Mm-hmm. And the first thing that really occurred to me, so just quick breakdown of this movie. Katharine Hepburn's niece actually plays their daughter.
Yep.
And did a better job than I thought. I was really impressed with her.
She wasn't
great.
bad.
She was actually really good. I had some problems with the way her character was written, but as the way it was played, I didn't have any trouble with her at all.
No. She was fine. She's no Katharine Hepburn.
No.
But she was adorable.
In this,
I thought she was great.
Simple in a good way, character.
Yeah, I thought it was great.
But anyway, she comes home to her parents, Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn, with this, she's so excited. She's met the man of her dreams and they're going to get married. And the man of her dreams is Sidney Poitier. And as soon as both of them
and just for an info, so Spencer Tracy, Katharine Hepburn, and her niece are all white. Yes. Sidney Poitier is African-American.
Yes.
Just want to throw that out.
Very
spoiler.
Handsome, dark-skinned African-American man. And so the whole thing is about how these parents are going to deal with,
this is a new thing. This was 67, man.
Yes. And, interracial marriage was made legal across the country while they were filming this. So there's actually a line in the film where Sidney Poitier, the man who plays Sidney Poitier's father, is talking to her saying, you can't even go to some states. This is illegal. And of course, by the time the film was released, it was now legal everywhere, but certainly not accepted everywhere.
Correct.
The movie still played. All I could think about while I was watching this movie was that the same setup was made in a hit movie in 2017, which is Get Out. Which is white girl brings home black boyfriend to meet her white parents. Of course, Get Out has this very dark underbelly and a whole lot more going on there, but exact same setup, down to the fact that she didn't tell her parents that he was black.
Sure.
She was going to surprise them when she got home. Same exact thing.
Well, and that it's hard to put this into words because it's very frustrating because you sit there and we see these movies that have come out recently, Hidden Figures and 12 Years a Slave, and all these are very racially charged, if you will. And certainly that's a huge part of their plot. And yet this is a 50-year-old plot.
Yeah.
And it's still being done.
And not much has changed.
Not much has changed because
parents are still going to have that reaction if they're not
some parents
aware.
Are correct.
If their cute little white daughter brings home a black man and says, "This is my guy," parents are still going to have that reaction.
Even
today.
if it's Sidney Poitier, the character was a professor, I believe.
A doctor.
Sorry, my bad.
And professor. He was lecturing at a university when she met him.
So he's successful.
Oh, extremely. He's a genius.
Were he white, this wouldn't be a plot of anything.
The only two things that you could say to him, other than the race, as a problem, is A, you want to marry him 11 days after you met him. Like, as a parent, I would go, what?
Yeah.
And that there is quite a bit of an age difference.
There is an age difference.
She's 23, he's 37, so it's a 14-year age spread, which everyone in 1967 thought was perfect. In fact, his father says women age better than men do anyway, so that actually works out fairly well. And that's probably close to the age spread between Katharine Hepburn and Spencer Tracy.
It may have been. They may have been a little closer.
I don't know. But he was quite a bit older. In fact, he was dying as this movie was being made, and they didn't want to insure him. They had to do a workaround so that they could. And the entire filming schedule, when he was done, they were done. It wasn't a heavy lift because most of it was these interior scenes, but he's got this big monologue at the end that I'm sure took a lot out of him.
Yeah.
It really is his movie in a lot of ways because he's the one.
Oh, I think so. Yeah. I think it was his movie because that's what it was. It was him versus Sidney Poitier. That is what this movie was, as far as,
and in a sense it was him versus himself. He was really kind of battling
down that
against all of his liberal values, but now they were really being tested.
Oh, he was totally being pushed by this daughter that he loves. If it were someone else, he could ignore it or poo-poo it, but it's his daughter whom he loves and adores, and he's like,
and I think if it were anybody else besides his daughter, he would have totally supported this marriage. Because he was painted as very much a liberal.
He was
in fact, Katharine Hepburn says to him at some point, "She is exactly the way we wanted her to be. This is how we raised her."
Right. So
we told her over and over and over again, there is absolutely nothing that makes white people superior to black
and sometimes
people.
Having to walk the walk that you've talked is more difficult, and that's what this is about.
Because he's not really against. I mean, they made him very sympathetic to a liberal audience because he's not really against her being in love with a black man so much as he believes her life is going to be really hard.
Which is true.
And that's one of the things I didn't like about the way that young girl was written is that she's so naive.
She is, but I thought you are in 1967 as you were.
You could have, although I think I had a feeling that as this movie were made today, at some point, the daughter would look at her dad and say, "Dad, I see the way people look at us. Like, I get it." In
2017, she would. I'm telling you, in 67, I think that naivete, it makes sense, which is what kind of puts this very dated. You sit there and you go, it's a dated because she's so naive. But there wasn't the internet. There were maybe 3 channels on the television. I mean, this is not...
Yeah. But anytime anybody observes that, the cab driver, the horrible woman at the gallery... her parents, his parents, every time they meet somebody, she gets this stare and these big googly eyes. I'm like, come on, girl,
but she's only known him how long?
11 days.
Okay. So you sit there and you put that all as to, oh, well, when we've been around for a while, it's a naivete that I understand. And so I feel like it's plausible.
I guess, but I guess I respected her character a little less.
But it's frustrating. It's frustrating from our eyes now.
At least, if you're not looking out for you, at least look at the way that people are reacting to this person that you want to marry. They're being really cruel to him, and she doesn't seem to, she's so dippy in love. And she's young. They drew her to be fairly young. I think that's one of the things where I saw that it was a little dated. Because if it had been made today, at some point she would have looked at her dad.
You have to recognize it because there's no way to be that much under a rock. But there was no way to have all that information at that time.
Yeah. And the only other quibble I really had with this movie, I enjoyed it a lot more than I thought I would, actually. I thought it was going to be pretty... pedantic and kind of this lecture on tolerance. And it was actually much more entertaining than that. But one other quibble I had was, why do you have to get married next week? Like, there was...
I did not understand that.
They could have built a plot thing around it. They could have said, listen, he's going off to do missionary work in Africa in 2 weeks. And if we don't get married now, she can't come with me. And we're going to be separated for years. I mean, they could have come up with anything to say there's a plot device why we need to get married tomorrow, basically. Because she's leaving in 3 hours. And basically, if Spencer Tracy doesn't give his blessing to this marriage, Sidney Poitier is not going to marry her. That's kind of the, that's the, so it's very kind of, they've raised the stakes in a way, in an important way, but it didn't make any logical sense.
But again, I still say that it's because you have to put it in that time period. We are used to different plot devices. We're used to the stakes have to be really high. And
we give more of a smell test to things of whether or not they and I think maybe.
But this it was a slower pace. It was like I was talking about Wait Until Dark, really slow in the beginning, and hard to keep a fifth grader's attention, and so they didn't pay attention to all that. But that was kind of the pace of a lot of movies. They were just slower. People had more time when they were at them. You didn't have to jump right in. Steven Spielberg hadn't started yet. That's how I look at it, as that's just par for the course for that age movie. That's kind of how I am. And I think the ones that are not like that are the odd ones, because I think that everything was just at a slower pace, and you wrote things and you had all of this other time, and your stakes didn't have to be that high. He was black. That was how high can the stakes get. You didn't need to get any higher than that.
And the truth is that story still very much works today.
The story does, but as you said, the naivete doesn't.
The naivete doesn't, but the story really does. To me, I have to say Katharine Hepburn won an Oscar for this. Kind of surprising to me. It didn't really seem like a Best Actress role, although she was amazing, because she always is.
She's always very good.
Spencer Tracy did not. I believe he had already gone by the time the Oscars even happened. I think he died very shortly after filming. I think by the time this movie was released, he was already gone.
I believe it. Wow.
But who really stole it for me was this actor. First of all, the actress who I hated her character. She did a great job. Was Isabel Sanford, Mrs. Jefferson, who played the maid, who was just, they wanted to show, I think, that both black and white people could be fairly closed-minded about this whole thing.
Yes.
And she was not just against, interracial marriage. She was really kind of racist. I mean, she said at some point, I don't want a man of my race getting above himself. And that's how she saw a black man marrying a white girl. And I think that was
also talking about that generation as well, and that saying that this is the generation, the Spencer Tracy, the Isabel, although she's quite a bit younger than Spencer Tracy.
Yeah.
Anyway, that generation, they both had issues with that. They weren't used to that, and it was going to be uncomfortable.
But who stole the movie for me was Bea Richards as Sidney Poitier's mom. So she has this lovely monologue with Spencer Tracy out on the balcony where she basically says to him, your wife and I, we get it. We remember what it's like to be in love, and you clearly don't. Because if you did, you couldn't think this way. And it's just, I don't know if it's not very practical, which is really what the movie's about. It's the romantic versus the practical. Because this couple is going to have a hard time. And
most definitely. And
she
I think,
understands that, but she also is just love trumps that for her.
But I also like her, that she was calm.
Yes.
She was there was none of these histrionics that a lot of times African-American women were stereotyped as. And here she was, this most serene, if you will.
Yeah.
Personality.
But so affecting. Like, you didn't need the histrionics or the ugly
sometimes you go under
as
an actor. Sometimes you go under. But also, I will say that she goes toward what you were saying about the naivete of Catherine, of the daughter.
Catherine Houghton, Joey,
yeah. That's what she's talking about. She's talking about that naivete, that when you're in love, there's a glow about everything.
Yeah.
But I think it is specifically when you're in love and you're that young.
Yeah.
And I think all of this alludes to the fact that the girl is, 21, 22? 23. Okay. And in 1967, that's like being 21. I mean, it's you're so young, and you have virtually. She's been sheltered because she has these loving family. She had a great childhood, but she's lived in this white privilege bubble.
Yeah, and it's not surprising also that this film is set in San Francisco, where she grew up. Her mom runs an art gallery in San Francisco. I mean, she has lived in the most liberal bubble you could possibly ever imagine. But still naive. Sure.
And so I think
any bubble is a bubble. I mean, she just doesn't know how bad racism can get. She's never been to Alabama.
Correct. And I think that's important. And that also goes toward that it's very, now Because I can probably YouTube something in Alabama right now. I don't have an excuse for not knowing what's going on in Alabama. You know what I mean?
Good point.
Where in 1967, how's she going to know? How's she going to know? And I mean, in the papers, there's that stuff, but but they'll see that they're in love. You see, and everybody will accept it.
She says she had the reaction. She had the big eyes when she saw the couple show up. So she knows how bad it's going to be. But then she also just sees them. And according to her and Katharine Hepburn, all you have to do is look at these two and see they're going to be okay. Also, final word is, the priest, Cecil Kellaway, who I just loved in this movie. He actually makes a point at some point when he's trying to talk some sense into Spencer Tracy. And he says, I've known a lot of interracial couples, and they tend to do pretty well because they're really there for each other. So there's actually an argument from the other side.
That you become your own island.
Yes.
That you have to be.
They'll stick together because they have to, because so many people are against them.
Correct.
Their bond actually gets
stronger. And then once they have children, you have that impetus, and the stakes are higher than ever at that point, because you're there and you're going to be this defense system together for your children, which are going to have their own issues. But I was very young. I was 4 when this came out. In 1969, that was when desegregation happened in Nashville, Tennessee. So my first grade was the first year that schools were integrated. So I grew up with all colors in my classes. Not a big deal. But I will tell you this, in 4th grade, my best friend her mom was white, her dad was black. And she and a brother. And she was very, very smart. But I remember going to, we had, I won't say the teacher's name. I'm sure she's dead, but I won't say her name anyway. But she was talking, and she was very, very religious, was this. And this is 1972-ish. And I remember her standing there, because this was, and saying that God didn't want, blacks should marry blacks, whites should marry whites. That's what God wanted. She said this, and again, separation of church and state, you're like, what? I was in Nashville, Tennessee. It was 1972, and it was this Southern Baptist woman. I remember going home. I was beside myself, upset, because this woman had said this, and my friend was right there, who has a white mother and a black dad, and her teacher is telling her that she's wrong, that there's something wrong with her. And I think that was a little burst in my bubble. And again, I was way younger than the people in this movie. But my whole point is, even 4 or 5 years later, you sit there and you go, I have these multiracial children. They were professors at Vanderbilt University, both of them. Okay? Well-established, smart. They can't protect her from everything. Yeah. She goes into her 3rd grade class, and some idiot says this crap. Yeah.
And you couldn't, and actually Spencer Tracy actually says that to her at one point. What about your kids? What about when you have kids? Because that's what he's thinking too, is that you're never going to protect these. So final word on this one, because I just thought of this, and this will end on a happier note. Best scene of the whole movie for me is when Katharine Hepburn, one of her employees, shows up to the house just to see what's going on, because she caught a glimpse of this couple coming in. And Katharine Hepburn escorts her out after she's been so insulting to both her daughter and this man. And by this point in the film, Katharine Hepburn is totally on the side of this couple. She's really Spencer Tracy's main antagonist in this film, trying to get him to come around. And she just fires her on the spot. And it's the most diva-licious moment in the whole. She's so. I was just snapping my fingers and all over the place. It was so great. I mean, it was so satisfying to watch this. So a movie that definitely took a side. The film took a side.
It did take a side,
but it took the right side.
But I think it was also educational.
Yeah,
you go to see a Spencer Tracy, Katharine Hepburn, not knowing, because all it says is guess who's coming to dinner, and maybe I'm sure Sidney Poitier was probably on the poster, but again, you don't know what that means, and you go in there and maybe you got a little enlightened.
Yeah, the movie poster that I saw was actually the couple. Sidney Poitier and Catherine Houghton just kind of walking towards you, and it's like, guess who's coming to dinner? So it kind of, but then Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn were the first 2 names. Actually, no, Spencer Tracy, then Sidney Poitier,
because he was up and coming.
Then Katharine Hepburn, and also had a big year because In the Heat of the Night came out in the same year. So he was a big deal, as he should have been. So great movie.
Yep. If you haven't seen it, it's definitely a classic to watch.
You should. You really should. It's not a lecture. It's a very entertaining film with great performances.
Well written.
Yeah. So when we come back, probably the kind of most famous film from '67.
I'm going to say the word.
Go ahead.
Plastics.
Open wide. It's your prescribed dose of POPeration with Eric and Stacey.
Welcome back to POPeration. I'm Stacey.
I'm Eric, and today we're talking about films that are 50 years old, movies that were made in 1967. So we've talked about Bonnie and Clyde, Warren Beatty and Faye Dunaway. We've talked about Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, Spencer Tracy, Sidney Poitier, Oscar winner.
Both are classics, just fun classics to see, as is this that we're fixing to talk about.
Yeah, this I actually saw last night in preparation for.
I'd
seen it before. I had seen it before, but it had been a long time.
Here's the thing about this movie is that you will see other movies that will do things that reference it.
Yes.
And
therefore, it can feel a little cliched, but it was the first one.
It was the first one to do some of this stuff.
Yeah, and this is The Graduate, directed by Mike Nichols. Little piece of Oscar trivia. The only film, I think, when I read on IMDb this morning, that was nominated for a bunch of Oscars, won Best Director, and didn't win anything else. It's usually a movie that is like the best, but that actually made sense to me. Watching this, I was like, this is a star vehicle really for Mike Nichols. It's really all about the directing of the film.
Is amazing.
Because the performances are really understated.
Yeah,
people are not
it's
doing
a different
much.
style.
Yeah.
It's a very different style of acting. Although Anne Bancroft, amazing.
Oh, she's great.
I love her.
She's great.
So much. And in this one, I have no words. She was brilliant, but
I think it's because of her character. I mean,
no, it's an awful character. It's awful, and I would hate to be her daughter too. You're just totally screwed up too, and I certainly wouldn't marry you. Spoiler. But anyway, so The Graduate. You want to give a quick? You just saw it, so I'll let you do the quick. Synopsis.
So The Graduate is meant to be an allegory of disaffected youth in the 1960s, and it centers around Dustin Hoffman, his first kind of breakout movie, where he plays a young man who's just graduated from college.
The opening scene is his graduation party.
Yes,
he's
just graduated from college, and his parents live in L.A. The very first thing you see, he's on an airplane coming home, and they announce that it's been a 4.5-hour flight. So you imagine that he's come from the Northeast somewhere where he's gone to school, and now he's in LA where everything is bright and sunshiny and big swimming pools, and it's all filmed in this very kind of artificial kind of way. So it's got a lot to say about Southern California. And he drives a friend of his parents home. She says to him, and this is Anne Bancroft as Mrs. Robinson, my husband's taking the car. Can you drive me home? And so he takes her home, and she immediately pours him a drink, shows him her legs, and then takes her clothes off. I mean, she is so...
Well, it's that iconic scene that if you've ever seen like the soundtrack album, and it's the picture that's always there with, you see Dustin Hoffman under her bent leg there.
Actually, that's in the hotel.
Is that in the hotel? That's later. Sorry, my bad. But, okay, never mind. Sorry.
So she basically takes her clothes off, right? And just announces to him, you know, I'm available for you whenever you want. If you don't want to sleep with me right now, that's fine. But I like you very much. And he just freaks out and runs downstairs.
Because he's 21.
Yes.
He's 21.
Yes. And as her husband is coming home, runs downstairs, he walks in, and Dustin Hoffman just announces, I just brought your wife home because... And then you get this really weird scene that I have to talk about this scene where it's his 21st birthday, and his parents gave him a scuba outfit, and he's just in the kitchen in full scuba gear, and then walks out, jumps in the pool, and stands at the bottom of the... It is the weirdest scene. It's just so odd. But it does feel very isolating because you see it from his point of view in the scuba mask. And
right,
people are talking to him.
I feel like that's...
He can't hear them. It's a
got
metaphor.
it, but it's also... And it's his... He had to get away.
Yeah,
And where else can he get away? No other choices. And he's like, well, they get... You know, and so...
the very next scene, he's drunk, he's at a hotel, he calls Mrs. Robinson and says, wondered if I could take you out sometime. And her response is, give me an hour. And she's right there. And they go up to a hotel room, and he freaks out and is almost not going to do anything again. And she finally, it works this time, and she seduces him. So they have this affair that goes on for a couple months. And then it kind of comes to a head where she says to him, you can't ever see my daughter. Because the other thing that's weird is that her husband is putting a lot of pressure on Dustin Hoffman to take his daughter out for a date. I'm like, what are you pimping out your daughter for? It's just, that was very dated. That was very 67.
It's very dated.
But it's very important to her that they not ever. And so Dustin Hoffman kind of takes it the wrong way. And he's like, what, I'm not good enough for your daughter? And it's like, dude, you've been sleeping with this woman for months now. Can you kind of see why maybe she doesn't want you to hang out with her daughter?
Again,
that's
21.
weird. Yeah. But the very next thing that happens is the parents kind of do an ultimatum. You will take out this girl. We want you to take out, because the two dads are law partners.
Right.
So he falls in love with Elaine, the daughter. Another lovely performance that I didn't expect from Catherine Ross. I just thought she was
I'm not
great.
a huge Catherine Ross fan, so I'll be honest with you.
I wasn't either.
I'm like, she's fine, but I don't, that character.
But she does what you need her to do. She's just angelic, and you can actually believe that he. And also, there's some things that would have been very troubling in a movie made today.
Oh, there's a lot of things that have been troubling in a movie.
Yeah, but goes out with her, falls in love with her, and then Mrs. Robinson freaks out, says, "I'm going to tell her everything." So he beats her to it. He tells her everything. She freaks out, and then when she goes back to school to Berkeley, he follows her to Berkeley and starts a romance with her. And so that's kind of a lot of the movie in a nutshell. It's hard to kind of put that movie in a nutshell because quite a bit is happening. One of the things that really kind of got me was that if this movie had been made today, I felt like it would have been mostly about him trying to have a relationship with Catherine Ross with this big secret hanging over them. And they spent very little time there. One night.
It depends on who directed it, because there would also be, you want to have as many cougar sex scenes as you possibly could.
Yeah, that too. There would have been a lot more sex.
It depends on who's directing and writing it. And I think this is what it was supposed to be, but it felt very coming of age, but not the 13-year-old coming of age kind of thing, but so we have, we've whined about our parents who were stuck in the 50s. Now we've got our college degrees. Crap. Now what?
Yeah.
And being overwhelmed. And
Dustin Hoffman spends a lot of time in this very existential funk. Like, what am I going to do with my life? And that seems to be the source of his depression.
Yes.
Having an affair with Mrs. Robinson doesn't make him less depressed. It just kind of gets him further into
it's another stressor.
Yeah.
I mean, it's.
And then he meets Elaine, and suddenly the sun parts through the clouds, and life is going to be beautiful. But how do you have a romance with a girl when you've been sleeping with her mother for 3 months? So the other thing that really so this is what got me about Catherine Ross, is that he follows her to Berkeley, and she doesn't want to see him. And you can you think you understand why, only to find out that when they finally have a confrontation, she believes that he raped her mother. The story that Anne Bancroft gave her was, I didn't have an affair with him. He took me to a hotel and forced himself upon me.
Right.
And I'm thinking, okay, if you think you're talking to your mother's rapist, why did you visit him in his apartment and close the door behind you? First of all, that just seemed odd to me. And then as soon as he says, but this is what happened, she believes him immediately, which I kind of got only because she's lived with her mother for years.
Well, and that was part of my problem with that whole. And again, some of it feels like it was thrown in because, we need to have a reason why she's so mad or whatever, aside from the fact that you've been sleeping with my mom kind of thing. She's known her mom forever.
And she knows that Mrs.
So
Robinson
this is not the first time this woman has done this. And when you watch Mrs. Robinson seduce what's-his-face, you realize this is not the first time she's done this.
Yeah.
So because she's really good at it now.
Yeah.
So Missy has practiced. So it's one of those where you go, so why are you surprised? At your mom's behavior. And then why do you believe her, but then suddenly not? There were some things there. I had some issues with this.
Yeah, and the only thing that really explained her in a lot of ways is that she fell just as hard for him on their first date as he did for her. Because she goes to amazing lengths to forgive or make excuses for this young man. But it kind of works. The other thing that this movie is fairly famous for, aside from plastics, right? Which is,
that's at the very beginning.
At the graduation party, somebody says, "I'm just going to say one word to you. Are you ready?
This is for the future.
Ready?
Yeah.
Are you ready? Plastics."
basically saying that's what you need to invest in. I mean, that's the new money maker. But it also is
such a great symbol for how artificial this older generation is. That this is, what they're so concerned about. And he wants something real and he wants something tangible. The other thing that it's kind of famous for me, that always the image I'm left with, is at the end of the movie, it's ostensibly happy ending. He and Elaine are going to run away together, and they're smiling and they're happy, and then all of a sudden the camera lingers.
It stays on them.
Have this look on their face like, what the fuck did we just do?
It's one of those where had they cut earlier, you have one feeling about it. But because he let the camera keep rolling, you have a different feeling.
And clearly directed both of them to have this scared, oh my God,
he's like, okay, you're going to be really happy, like end of movie, Disney, whatever. And then it's all going to sink in, and we want to see that sink in. And
that's something that a movie today would not do. I just feel like this is why
it's a slower pace. Because we got to bam, bam, bam.
But it did work with the story, because what's going to happen with these people basically is that young Dustin Hoffman and Catherine Ross, they've cut themselves off from their parents. At least her parents definitely are never going to speak to her again so long as she's with this man. And his parents might forgive, but this is, their dads are law partners, right? So, I mean, if they've basically just gotten on a bus and sailed away from everything they've ever known, and now it's completely up to them. They are on their own, which is an interesting metaphor about that entire generation.
Well, and I think that's when we talk about, if we try to tie all of these movies, these three that we talked about specifically, these are baby boomers. These are the baby boomers. This was that was the baby boomer idealism there, the Dustin Hoffman. That was the baby boomer idealism in Catherine Houghton about it's all going to be fine because they'll see how much in love we are. And that was the baby boomer push from my parents, I'm going to do my own thing my own way, in Bonnie and Clyde. And I think that they're all three good examples of where that generation was wanting to go, what they were feeling at the time.
Yeah. So my notes here around our final diagnosis for these films was just, it's the times they are changing, right? I mean, this is three movies that are really all about huge shifts in society, done in some really obvious ways, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, and some really subtle ways with The Graduate. But they're all just very much about this generation that doesn't know the way forward because this is something that
everything was new, which is kind of where we are with millennials now, in that everything is new. There's nothing. The technology that wasn't around 20 years ago, and what technology is coming up, we haven't even thought of yet. I mean, there's this whole 21-year-olds are still graduating and going, holy crap.
And they're not going to have the lives their parents had.
You can't.
Because the world is too different.
And that's, I think, maybe that was what was happening here for the first time. That wasn't really a choice anymore.
Yeah.
Because things were changing too much.
Yeah.
So there you go. Wow, 50 years.
50 years ago. And I mean, some of the things about these movies are pretty dated, and some of them are really
It's kind of sad that some of the stuff that we're still struggling with, that you would hope in 50 years we would have figured it out.
Yep.
And several of the movies that we didn't talk to also relate to some of those issues.
Absolutely.
As well.
I mean, Camelot.
I was going to say, what are you going to do when your queen, is making it with your top knight? What do you do? Those are struggles. Those are everyday struggles. I don't know where I'm going with that. No idea. I just love Robert Goulet. That's all I'm saying.
Well, who doesn't?
I know.
Yeah.
I love him. He's awesome.
Same moi. Anyway, that's it for this week.
Yeah, that's the 1967. That was fun. I think that
was really
let us
fun.
know if you like the idea of us taking, doing these anniversary things
Trips
about movies.
Trips
back into time. Because we had a good time. And if there's a certain year or something that you thought, this was a really good year, I want y'all to talk about it. Let us know.
Do that.
And subscribe.
On iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play. And hey, if you get your podcast from Apple, can I just leave us a review? We want to hear what you think.
Yeah.
And we want to hear what's going on with
exactly.
you. Exactly. And we'll see you next time. We'll be back next week. This is POPeration. I'm Eric.
I'm Stacey.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to POPeration with Eric and Stacey. Check out our website at POPerationRoom.com for links to our blog and other extras. Don't forget to subscribe to POPeration via iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, YouTube, and other podcast locations. You can also follow at POPeration Room on Facebook and Twitter. Music provided by PurplePlanet.com.